in just a moment, I'm going to turn the floor over to Stephen Hannock and Red Grooms. I'm not exactly sure what will happen after that, but I do know at some point there will be time for Q&A, and I'm pretty sure we'll be wrapping up in time for those of you headed to the concert at New England Youth Theater to get there before the show starts. At least I've requested that of Steve, who's going to sort of be guiding the conversation. So first I'd like to introduce Stephen Hannock, who's sort of our host and interviewer tonight. Steve, as many of you know, is one of the country's most acclaimed contemporary artists. He's best known for his atmospheric landscapes, compositions of flooded rivers, nocturnes, and large vistas that often incorporate handwritten text, revealing Steve's personal experiences and relationships with the people and places depicted in his paintings. That exhibit that we had here last summer contained over 30 of Steve's works, including 6 of his stunning and signature depictions of the Connecticut River Oxbow outside Northampton. Steve's roots are deep in this part of the world. He grew up outside Albany, went to Deerfield Academy, then Bowdoin College, and then spent most of his undergraduate years as about one of a dozen male students among a few thousand females at Smith College, where he studied with Leonard Baskin. Steve then was based for a time in Northampton, and now he works out in North Adams, Mass. But Steve's reputation and his reach extend around the globe. His work is held in the collections of the Whitney, the Met, the Smithsonian, the National Gallery, and the NFA in Boston, among many others. He won an Academy Award for special visual effects for the 1998 film What Dreams May Come, starring Robin Williams. And earlier this year, he received the prestigious Frederick E. Church Award, presented annually to honorees who've made extraordinary contributions to American art, culture, and historic preservation. When I mentioned to Steve that we would be doing this exhibit of Red's work, he asked me to let him know when his friend Red would be coming up to give an artist talk, and I said I didn't think that would be happening because from what I understood, Red didn't really want to get up and give a lecture about his work. And Steve said, oh, leave that to me. And next thing I knew, Red had agreed to come up and take part in tonight's conversation. I suspect because he may be thinking that Steve's likely to do most of the talking, but we'll have to see. Red Grooms was born in Tennessee and moved to New York City in the 1950s to immerse himself in the art scene there. He's since had a wildly prolific career, having worked in virtually every artistic medium. Red is recognized as a pioneer in site-specific sculpture and installation art, and he developed an art form called sculpto-pictoramas, vibrant three-dimensional constructions melding sculpture and painting, in which viewers can completely immerse themselves. One of the early sculpto-pictoramas was City of Chicago, a room-sized creation with towering sculptures of Mayor Daley and Abraham Lincoln, Hugh Hefner, and Al Capone, with a soundtrack of gunfire and burlesque music. Then later came Ruckus Manhattan, about which the New York Times had this to say: viewers do not stand around, hands on chins, in quiet contemplation at this exhibit. Rather, they laugh and shout, get stuck in Mr. Groom's rendering of the Woolworth Building's revolving door, or jostle each other on the Staten Island Ferry's gangplank. All the no-touch rules are abandoned. The lines separating carnival and culture, art and kitsch, seem to have disappeared. There have been other works in this vein too, including The Bus behind you, which is currently on only its second trip outside New York since it was created in 1995. In addition to having worked in the collection of the Met, the Museum of Modern Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Hirshman Museum, and scores of other important collections and museums around the world, Red has the distinction of being perhaps the only artist whose work is regularly featured on ESPN's Baseball Tonight. His 2012 creation titled Homer is installed behind the outfield wall at Miami Marlins Stadium, and it comes to life every time a Marlin hits a home run with an explosion of water and pink flamingos, palm trees and sunbursts and soaring seagulls, and of course a leaping Marlin. Although some baseball purists grumbled when Homer was first unveiled, Red's work is generally loved and admired by viewers of all ages, art aficionados and those who've never set foot in the museum. And I can tell you that the response to this exhibit that we've had here has been unlike anything we've shown during my tenure as director, which goes back 6 years. Our attendance this summer has been much, much higher than usual. There have been so many families with kids coming through, and everyone inevitably leaves with huge smiles on their faces. It's been a great honor to show this work, which will be up for a few more weeks. and it is certainly an honor to have the artist here tonight. With that, would you please welcome Stephen Hannock and Red Grooms.
With our conversations going on back there, it's probably a good idea we didn't have one. But we're going to keep it going here. So thank you so much for this this welcome. This is a real treat for us to be here. And I got a message through our gallery. Coincidentally, we are represented by the same gallery in New York. They said, "Hey, Red wants to get in touch with you. You're doing something up in, Maine or something like that." I was like, "Well, come on, that's close, Okay. And so I called Brady and said, "Hey, yeah, what are we doing?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you." He goes, "Oh, okay." So, but then we started talking. Before you knew it, we were off and running. I said, "We got to stop this because this is just exactly the kind of thing I want to do when we get there." But before we get going, let me give you a little background from my thing because it leads right into some cool stuff about Red. And in a nutshell, as Danny mentioned, I went to some schools around here. I was going to be a professional hockey player. My dad was a pro, and that's what I was going to do. And the college coaches sent me to Deerfield Academy for a postgraduate year after I got out of high school and stuff. So that's where the scouts and the college coaches see what you're doing and so forth. And that's where I took my first art class. And my teacher for the art class is sitting right there, Mr. Jim Giddings, who absolutely, aside from being an absolute master, I got a kick out of it because I think I was older than he was. I mean, the hockey players now are like 28 years old in high school. And Jim, right out of Amherst, and that was a treat. And not long after, went to Bowdoin, and then went to Smith to study with Leonard Baskin, and wound up settling in Northampton for a while. And there, I was doing these big glow-in-the-dark things under black light. I'm not going to say I did a lot of acid in college, but, it was there, and, stuff happened, And so we have these environments under black light, you going into these things. So fast forward, time to move to New York. So this is the late 70s, and I didn't have a place to live there yet. But the first stop was the Whitney. I went in there and I met this guy, and I said, "Listen, I want to come down here. I think we should do a show of this stuff." And he's looking at this stuff. He's looking at the black light. Oh, he said, "We can't do this at the Whitney." I'm like, "Yeah, this is kind of new." "No, this is a happening, like Red Grooms." I'm like, "A happening, Red Grooms?" I never heard of any of this. So anyway, that was it. And went downtown to a place called The Kitchen, which is actually a kind of a hotbed for performance and new museum, new music. A great spot, and they're much more open to these things. And I walked and I said, "Listen, I think this would be really cool if we did this." He goes, "Oh, this is going to be like Red Grooms." I'm like, "I gotta check this out, Red Grooms out," And of course, he's duplicating the city of New York all over the place. And if you ever sit next to these people on these buses and stuff, you sit next to them in real life every day. So it's sort of ironic. And my first question to Red, we're going to skip around time-wise rather than start, when we first got going. We're going to sort of hop around a little bit. I mean, you were the first guy to plug into this happening thing. Did you just do it and then somebody else named it, or how did that?
Well, yes, Alan Caprow. I think he invented the word happening, and because I call mine plays. But we did start about the same time.
Were they in loft spaces or galleries?
Well, you know, actually, I started my first, I decided happening was a great word, so I switched, I do call them happening then. And my first happening was in Provincetown. So I actually got started in New England. And Provincetown was a great place to do it because all we had to do was put up a sign in the Sun Gallery and the whole town knew about it. And the first thing I did was a play called Fire. It was a large painting that I painted right in front of the audience. And I did that in '58, I believe.
Were you filming this while you're filming?
No one had a film camera.
Yeah.
Barely, you have a Kodak box camera. That's true.
And were any of your friends doing the same type of stuff? Was this the kind of thing where you did it sort of solo, and a lot of people piled on, or was it like an exchange?
Well, you see, it was one of the background things was poetry jazz, and that was jazz musicians playing with poets reading. And that was great because that was a kind of made up kind of new form of theater. And my friend Dominic Falcone, who with his wife Yvonne Anderson ran the Sun Gallery in Provincetown, I think Val was one of the first people that actually made up happenings, because he encouraged Yvonne and I to do a painting in her studio in the back of the Sun Gallery. We put paper bags over our heads so it would be anonymous. And we just, for several nights, we just wailed away a big canvas together. And we called the painting Friends. And Val was the only audience. It was the only audience, but it did feel, in doing it, it did feel like theater. And the next summer, which would be '59, he said I should do it with an audience. And I did. And in this sense, it beat out by a technical knockout. It beat out Alan, because Alan did the 18 happenings in, I think it was either September or October in New York. And I knew he was going to do it, so he was inspiring me to do it.
Oh, cool, okay.
And, so it had that slightly
competitive
false starts and so forth.
Yeah.
Competitive.
Yeah, no, that's very much a celebration of the arena.
Yeah.
Now,
The gladiatorial aspect of art.
yeah, right, yeah, exactly. They mop up the blood after the things.
Yeah, we're friends, but when we get out, I have to kill each other. That's expected.
Oh, man. Okay. You weren't with Pierre back then, were you?
No, I didn't know.
Pierre's our yeah, we were just saying, I don't know what it is about some of these French guys, he's married to a French woman too, so, but they can live here for 50 years and you still can't understand a word they say. And, but it's, now where did the Provincetown thing fit into that time period? Because, as Danny mentioned, Wolf is a huge presence, up here, and he was there. De Niro did some stuff with those. I showed with De Niro at Salmon Rock, along with Paul Ressica, who was also Ressica, Wolf, and De Niro, and you guys were in this Provincetown thing with Hans.
Yes. Yeah, Provincetown was a true artist colony, and that had been an artist colony for 75 years before that, at least, like 100 years.
Yeah,
but it was a long tradition, and we were just part of that. But in the 50s, it wasn't sort of I think there must have been almost 20 galleries in the town. And it was, the galleries, what was going on there with the summer artists coming in was quite exciting.
It was nothing like what's going on now with the Cape Cod type stuff, right?
Unfortunately, I haven't been around Cape Cod in a long time, but
a lot of seagulls.
There's a lot of seagull painting.
Yeah.
Good. I did a seagull painting myself.
Yeah. Your seagulls get up and walk off with kids and whoever's around. These things are there meant to be. They're very precious, it's a whole different vibe there. And I remember when I came to New York, people would be talking about the Providence Center. I'd sort of scratching my head because that had been over in this whole.
How come you didn't go there?
Well, you know, I was ducking slap shots. You know, that's all. I was playing hockey, like skate in Canada in the summertime, and you know, the coaches would say they wouldn't want you taking any art or theater or stuff because it would make the college coaches think you're trying to pad your curriculum, and then you'd be a harder sell to their admissions departments. And the big and little Ivy League schools were the ones that had the really good hockey programs and stuff. And it made sense to me, so I never took any art until I went to Deerfield. And it's so funny because Jim will, you know, Dan Odebarsky was a huge influence on me after I got out of school, the years that went on after college. But he basically kicked me out of class and said, just go draw. Just go draw. And, you know, just show me the drawings every once in a while. And, you know, in a place like some of these boarding schools that have your every minute accounted for somebody to say take off for a couple of hours is like a serious currency. And so that sort of, wow, this is interesting, you know. And but one of the things I noticed when I was starting to really get into making work was how similar the thought process. We were kidding about the gladiatorial thing, but the thought process is very similar between athletics and the making of art. And this was really evident when my second year at Salvador O'Reilly, you know, our friend Larry is now serving 15 to 20 years for just a small $188 million he's borrowed from people. He's going to pay back, so that was interesting. But John McEnroe was an intern at the gallery, so of course we completely, you know, sync up. And the stories from one to the other were completely into the idea of doing endless practice, rehearsal, for years and years. And then when that moment of execution happens, you have to act spontaneously and fluidly, and you're still not guaranteed success after that. So that whole thing was very cool. But that's, you know, at Salvador O'Reilly's where I also met Ressica and De Niro were there, and they would talk about Hans Hofmann. And I just never got that trip happening from anywhere in the Cape. You know, it was happening up in the McDowell Colony. Yaddo's another one that had sort of taken over that type of thing. You know, for writers, but also for painters.
Well, I remember when we first met in an art gallery. I can't remember the year. And you were, the way you were and what you talked about and everything, I thought I should know who he is. I should know who this is, but I never heard of him.
You know, it was fun. Yeah, you know, it was fun. We were introduced by Picasso's grandson, which was, have you seen Richard at all in the last few years? You know what's wild about Richard? He used to say, oh man, he's a French guy. He lived in Paris, and he was over in New York running a gallery. Running a restaurant, a really good restaurant. Oh man, I'm so glad I'm not a painter. Can you imagine me trying to paint? I mean, my grandfather was such a pain in the ass to begin with, but you know, trying to get underneath that shadow, and that was pretty well. But he was. I saw him right after, around the change of the millennium. Remember Marion, that girl he was hanging with? Man, she was cool. She was cool. And but he wasn't seeing her. He was seeing this other Parisian, you know, stunning lady, but very fragile, very skittish. And I mention this because when 9/11 happened, a chunk of the World Trade Center took out his apartment. Literally, took a chunk out of the corner of his apartment in Battery Park City. And you go in there, and it was like wide open with the Hudson River. And luckily they weren't there when this was going on. But of course, this skittish lady just freaked out. So they moved back to Paris. But he's definitely he was just like his grandfather, but he's got a lot of hair. So at least the last time I saw him, I don't know. Yeah, he was doing some very cool stuff. And then, that's when we started moving around. And you were, shortly after that, you were asked to do a carousel
Right.
for the city of Nashville. And I thought, wow, what a cool thing. And the thing that struck me about this, and this I hadn't seen any studies for it or whatever, but Red's telling me about what's going to be on this carousel, what the kids and everybody are going to climb onto. And let's just say that it's not your typical horses all lined up going around in a circle. There were corrupt politicians, there were jazz pianos with guys with their feet up in the air, and there was, what's that bug?
The chigger.
A chigger, yeah. I don't know what a chigger is.
Well, nobody's ever actually seen a chigger. They're so tiny, but they can give you a very deadly bite. And somebody told me that they're red. And so anyway, I had full license to make up what I wanted to. It was fun to do. But Steve was right. The carousel was all about Nashville's historical characters and some were contemporary. And it wasn't like a traditional horsing carousel.
Oh man, and this chigger thing, that it amazes me. You say you can't really see him because this thing was evil. This thing really like this, the little curly cute things, and he go, yeah, because they go and they burrow into your skin. I said, jeez, I'm not going to Nashville, which was ironic because 2 years later we wound up having a show together down there.
Yeah, we did. That was one of our last gigs together.
That was fun.
One of our last gigs.
That was, it was this gallery that used to handle Red stuff, and it was, yes, we put a really good show together there, and the one thing I remember, you had family members that showed up, but I really remember Lizzie Ann being pissed, because the party afterwards, she, the dealer cut a bagel in half and sort of put it on the table, and sort of, oh, here's some cream cheese. You can have some of mine. She said, you guys worked so hard for the show. Here's, he's got a couple of bagels on. This is inexcusable. Yeah, you tell him. Go ahead. So I'm having a show this winter in London. I'm going to take Louisiana over. Make sure these guys are on the straight and narrow with their entertainment and stuff. But actually, the fun thing about that was I did this photo assemblage piece. I do these photo assemblage things that are reminiscent of some of the work that David Hockney does, but Hockney tries to fracture his images in literally a cubist sort of rhythm. And what I do is I try to create a rhythm with the cacophony of the squares put together, but I like to play with time, like from my days in Northampton. Some of you here may be familiar with Nanny Vonnegut's work. She's a terrific artist, and she's married to Scott Breyer, who's also a terrific painter. And I got shots of her patting her pregnant stomach, and on the other side of the room is Nanny with the baby she was just pregnant with. So that you look at it, they're all in the same room. And then the next year, her sister, who gave me her apartment in New York, Edie Vonnegut, who's also a terrific painter, was pregnant, and I rearranged the photos in another piece where their two sisters are side by side patting their pregnant son. So it's a neat way to play around with this. Well, with this particular piece, Red was in the studio putting together these studies for this, carousel. I mean, it's a carousel. It's as big as it's bigger than this room. And
it's 42 feet.
Yeah, right.
And it has 36 individual characters. Yeah, and it has a canopy on top and all the rounding boards and carved everything. So it's completely about Nashville, which is bad because it's in storage right now. And we can't get a gig in any other city because it's completely dedicated to Nashville. But they kind of fumbled the ball on the whole deal.
But the museum just got involved, right?
The Tennessee State Museum has done a great job husbanding it because because there was some debt incurred, some mechanical breakdowns and this and that, and the nonprofit committee that ran it was in debt, but the Tennessee legislation bought it or paid the debt, and then they sort of got the fees, and the Tennessee State Museum took over. And Lois Riggins, who is the director of the museum, is trying very hard to get the piece.
Yeah, so at least
it's kind of sad story.
It's
I was just telling Danny, I'm kind of used to my stuff being in storage. I would say about 3/4 of my pieces, more than that actually, are in storage. But what bothers me more is having stuff out permanently. Because, I don't know, it's just kind of out there, hanging out there, too much exposure. And I'm sure my Marlin piece, which is 70 feet tall, will probably, maybe, I don't know if we'll see that next season or not. Because they're not getting that many home runs on them. The luck maybe not looking so good. I was kind of counting on the luck factor being what would make it popular there. Because it's a colorful piece, it's very colorful, and it's not political at all. And I thought it was a mild amusement. I made it completely for it to be funny and amusing, but right away people were quite annoyed that it was too colorful, because you think baseball is a very strict kind of formal game. So you never know what you're going to run into.
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, the thing that's cool about this carousel, I wish you had seen it, is it really does pull in all these characters from the Nashville culture. And this photo assemblage I did has the carousel way off in the distance, and the Nashville skyline is in the background. The Nashville skyline buildings literally shift right into the cabinet in Red's studio. And there he is, hanging on to one of the objects, one of the
chicken, right?
Yeah, this guy is really, angry, he's gonna sting somebody. And then you're on the phone in the foreground, and another thing that's sort of, you're morphed into twins with the study right in front of us.
Right.
And actually, the thing that's cool about this is I just did an edition of 20 for Pierre, for our dealer, and these are thousands of dollars a piece, probably $8,000 for each print for the edition of 20. But as Danny is so good at giving this velvet gloved headlock to you, we're going to provide, you guys are going to have access to this print for $900 a piece for 2 months. And so you can buy this thing, all the proceeds go to the Brattleboro Museum. So Pierre might not be getting any prints, but there's only 20 of them. So, so we just sort of figured out on the fly, that should be very cool. And the other thing that surprised me about Nashville is I was expecting, cowboy guys to be walking around and stuff. That place is like the recording studios are these Victorian houses, and you see these country western singers coming out with Lacoste shirts and penny loafers on. I mean, it's like a prep school for crying out loud. I mean, I guarantee you their audience doesn't know that. It's like, were you hit that?
Well, I had friends in high school who were guitar players, and they had a band, several of them actually, and a very close friend of mine sold programs on Saturday night at the Groom Opera, and I would go up there to just hang out with him. So, I mean, I'm definitely not a musician, but in the situation, I became kind of the clown for the high school country music group. And we form shape like an audience like this at the auditorium, and I would do some funny things, kind of as a diversion. So in a way, this thing kind of got me into what eventually became the happenings, actually.
And were you doing any painting in high
Oh
school?
yeah, I was doing art. But I was like, I did have an interest in theater. I kind of wanted to be a stand-up comedian or some kind of comedian. And, you know, it's a little bit around what about, but it was one of the ways and, you know, the theatricality of Nashville, it does have that.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're way on the outside of it, you can't help but notice it.
Yes, but the real that's a ways from the Miracle Mile where they have all the Hard Rock Cafe and all those things, where your carousel was.
Right.
Yeah,
Our carousel was right down in the downtown, right in the river where all the country music bars.
I can't believe well, I'm sure those museum guys will kick us back.
But it's hard for visual arts to compete with those country music artists. Right? Because we don't have a big award thing. And that might put us more into, you would be very good. You could be the MC of the whole thing.
Man, you kidding. Oh, God.
But I will say this, my mother and dad lived, and this is literally right next door to Minnie Pearl. And my mother and my father knew her and were friendly with her. I never met her myself, but you know, she knew about me and I had a career up north and all that. And then I wanted to put her on the carousel, very much so. And I was looking for it. Gaylord's Entertainment actually owns all the copyrights and everything. And I thought it was a nice cartoony thing of Minnie, but Gaylord's didn't like it, so they didn't let me do it. So even though a next door neighbor, I couldn't break through and put her on. Oh, did that, yeah, sure.
Well, speaking of emceeing, I noticed, I don't know if you guys, Red's got a couple of really good reviews in the New York Times for that installation you made. And one of my favorite pieces, that's actually one of the ones they reproduced. And you are, in fact, the MC in that painting. You're there in two places as far as
Right,
a young you and an older you. They're sitting there entertaining these deadbeat artists like us, who are at the bar, sort of slouching around and stuff. It's really a cool thing. When you came out with that, when you first introduced that painting, did you have a chart that said who each guy's was? Like, the catalog that they came out with?
Yeah, a key, that's a key.
Did you do that for the original piece?
No, I just made them up as I went along. But, you know, I did go to the bar, so it's my own personal remembrances of who was there.
Yeah, excuse me, have any of the galleries that were showing that piece ever done one of those key things so people could see who?
Yale made a wonderful key, and they made a little small catalog of the 3 pieces or key. That was another thing about the carousel that was difficult because all of the characters were known special people. But the carousel, the way it goes, it never necessarily doesn't stop in the same spot. So it's very hard to figure out how to put the label or where so that you could then somehow figure out which the character was. We can never quite figure it out.
Yeah, that's too
But
bad.
that's the whole thing with, if you do something like that and it gets you into the corner, now to have labels, and maybe you're doing the wrong thing, I have to say. I don't know if art's really supposed to go in that direction.
Yeah,
Maybe it shouldn't have labels.
I'm thinking, I'm sort of special. I'm thinking about doing that with one of the big pieces for London. The thing that I did, I've been working on this this ongoing project with the musician Sting, who's born in Newcastle, and this whole idea of a post-industrial city and shipbuilding and an entire industry coming to a close. I mean, you talk about bringing coals to Newcastle. Well, between the coal mining business and the shipbuilding, Newcastle is one of the wealthiest cities in the world. And over a 10-year period, both of those industries came to a close. There were 1 million people out of work in Northern England. And Sting has composed a musical. It's going to be opening on Broadway this time next year. But actually, in about 45 minutes, he's going on in the public theater to do a song cycle. There's no performance, but he's got a 15-piece band that is going to be performing the music. That'll just be, the recording for the music has just been released a couple days ago. And then once the musical gets underway, those are voices other than his that will be into this. But it's an amazing story, and just having the history of a culture come to an end is really a very chilling thing to imagine. But then again, you want to see this city coming back, and that's what my painting is about. It's about the second life the city has. And I mention this because this is an early dawn, so it's very dark, but instead of painting these slag heaps for the shipyards, I have these blue-green glowing ghost villages where the shipyards were, and the now closed coal mines are these blue starbursts that sort of radiate, they sort of spiral around in the composition, and nobody gets it. It never occurs to them. They must think they're pubs or something like that. So I'm sitting in like, and this is in
You need a lady.
I think that's what I asked him, and I'm sitting there going, like, we were at Mass Nova the other day, and they just opened a Kiefer museum for some of Anselm's paintings that are there. And, he scribbles on these things in German, and you go, well, Ansel, why don't we do this to make this? No, they do not know. They should not know these things, and to learn on their own. So there's that side of it too, And but I think going to London, you gotta have something that indicate. And Jason, the guy that's curating the thing, says there's a history of didactic things. He did that big Raphael show at Tate.
Right.
They really have a very successful play with those things. So I think I can, go that route without completely, saying goodbye.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm so tired of having these people. Those are nice. What are they? Now, have you been to the show in Yale?
Yeah. Let's go over there.
You gonna go back again? How much longer is it up there?
I think through March next year.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I was great. The pieces had not been shown in a very long time. And the Cedar Bar was owned by Charlie Benson, and he had his private collection. His private gallery, but and then he gave the piece to Yale, but it hadn't been in the public since 1987. And other one, Picasso Goes to Heaven, I did in 1973. Charlie bought it. I got a terrible review by Hilton Kramer. He said it was the worst thing that had been shown in New York since about 1895. I'm not kidding. It's kind of like a big backwards compliment. You go back into the next century, so you have to go back into another century to get something that bad. I don't know what it was.
That's a bad encourage, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, the brave collector, Charlie Benson, bought it about 3 days after this horrible review. And then took that and put it in his private exhibition space. And so it hadn't been out in the public since about 1974 or something.
Did he give his whole collection to you?
Not every bit, but a great, huge lot of it. And he has the one from Africa and African collections, marvelous, and all sorts of wonderful things.
Oh, fantastic. And what a great setup they got there, too. Holy smokes. You know, did you meet Jock Reynolds?
We met him, yes.
Very cool guy.
Yeah, the whole place is great.
You know, he went to Santa Cruz. He was like with all those stoners in Santa Cruz. And now he went to Andover before that, so he took over the Madison Gallery of American Art, which is a fabulous museum located in Manhattan. And then from there, he went to Yale, and he's just kicked that place into overdrive. They've got a lot of good projects going on, and all these really cool shows.
Right.
Lectures going on there. So that's delicious.
What's the largest piece of yours in storage?
Well, it's the piece I'm trying to finish now, the big Niagara Falls piece. It's right now, it seems to be in Alice Walden's crosshairs. And she opened that museum in Bentonville, Coastal Ridges.
Right.
Yeah. And
So she's
well,
she's seen it?
the guys that work for her have seen it, and so there's a whole. I'm sort of out of that thing. You know,
What's the dimensions?
8 by 20 feet.
You should tour around the country and charge a fee. That's a landscape tradition, actually.
Yeah, we. That's what
You gotta-
church used to do.
That's right.
Yeah, he used to.
And Bingham he had a very good thing. He had big rolls of canvas, and he reeled it out as a sort of a cinematic theater piece. I think that's right.
Yeah, you know, it'd be really cool. Do that and charge admission and have nobody show up. That'd be really cool. But what happens is now, of course, we have movies and
That's
TV. You know, so that's.
Yeah, but now everybody would really love it because you got all this other stuff that's so small
Yeah.
that if they brought out one of these really gigantic kind of dioramas or something,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, forget about this little.
Well, that's where your stuff comes in. Your stuff is diamond. And I'm really thrilled that you're not using glass on all these because literally they come right out of the room. Like, remember that, what was the show? Louisiana, it was like a green background. Was this the piece that was against the
Yeah.
wall piece?
Yeah.
This is just launched out of the middle. That's so cool. I mean, it really has that more of a direct effect on some of the things that we're doing in the national history.
Well, have you ever had the idea of, using your work as a sort of showbiz thing and then charge admission?
Well, you know what I was doing when I was painting in the dark. That's exactly what we did.
That was Linda's.
And I've worked with musicians. I worked with this guy Anthony Davis, who's more known as he composes operas. He did Malcolm X, and he does these amazing jazz compositions. But he's also an amazing piano improvisation player. And he'd come into these environments. We'd be surrounded by these glowing paintings in the dark, and he'd just take off. And he wouldn't have to see. So it was perfect. You get some musicians after reading music or whatever, the light distracts away from the rest of the environment. But he'd be sitting there and he'd just play away. And one of the fun things about watching him play was that he used to say when he was a little kid, he used to play in school, like when he was in 4th and 5th grade, he used to play on his desk. And he could hear every note he was hitting. And I wound up doing a woodcut of him. I used to do these life-size woodcuts of jazz musicians and just got in with all these crazy jazz musicians. None of the artists wanted to do work for jazz musicians because they couldn't pay any money. They'd all go into rock and roll. So I sort of had the whole place to myself, which was really a fun experience. But Anthony would sit there and he'd be playing with. I'd get down to eye level to do these drawings, and I did this woodcut thing. He wound up using that for promotion for years. He still uses it, but the thing that really gets me now when I see this woodcut is he's got an afro that's out to here, and that was it wasn't exaggerated. It was like he picked that thing out, so it's real. But being a graphic medium, it's a solid black thing. But a fun thing that happened as a result of these brass woodcuts, this is not a complete non sequitur, I got a note in the mail from the African National Congress in South Africa. And they had, it was a little brochure, and it showed their stuff, and it was like little mimeograph sheets, and they were raising awareness for Nelson Mandela, who'd been in prison for the last 20 years or whatever. And they asked me if I'd be interested in doing some of these woodcuts, you know, a woodcut of Nelson Mandela they could use in their marches and so forth. Of course, I jumped on it, and then I said, sure, you know, there's no email, so I sent off a snail mail, you know, paper airplane, and got over there a couple weeks later. They sent me all these shots, and of course, it never occurred to me that, the most recent photograph of Mandela had been taken just before he went to prison, because they wouldn't allow any photography of this guy. And so I sort of put these things together, and I aged them and stuff, and came out with this life-size piece it's sort of 3/4 view that really came out as a very good likeness. And I sent it back to them, and I only did about 5 or 6 prints of that. And 3 weeks after I sent it back, they released him from prison. So I like to buy the art. You know, you had force those chains to drop. But when he got out of prison, I was just astonished at how much thinner he was. And it never occurred to me they weren't feeding him in prison and he dug. You know, so that was a glaring mistake. But it's really sort of a fun thing that happened as a result of doing this printmaking. You were getting into prints of cutouts that actually you could put together. What sort of editions were they done?
75.
Really?
We started at 75.
How hard are they? You know, you can obviously put them together.
We have this wonderful woman, Roseanne Watches. She's the expert. She's been doing it for years.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. She works with Bud Sharp. Bud Sharp.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the printer that does them out of Lyons, Colorado. Yeah, I did a piece called the Dolly Salad, and it's all made out of paper. It's printed. Oh, there it is. Yeah, here it is. Good old Dolly. The greatest. Yeah, it's 3D, and I didn't. Everybody asked me why I made him as a salad. But I just thought he, you know, could have done fruit. So he has a little fruit, but it's just a little fruity. He got his fruit in. And it ended up with a dome-like cover. So it looks like something in a delicatessen. But this was made by Steve Anderson out of Minneapolis. Steve is a really master lithographer and master printer of all time. This is a combination of lithograph and silk screen and some elements like these ping pong balls for the eyes, and his mustache is actually metal. But essentially we work on flat aluminum plates. I draw, I make a maquette really that looks basically like this. Then the printer takes it, flattens it out, arranges it on the sheet. Very much like traditional cutout. You know, there's a tradition of 19th century and later theaters that they were made with it. Background.
Did you do the math, or do they?
No math. I don't. No math is not in this. I do no math whatsoever. Yeah, not a whole team, just one woman.
As you can gather, Red's the guy who was doing those drawings of the eccentric history teacher in high school and sliding them under the door, you know, of course, so everybody knew. But now we're winding down here. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to toss around? We can keep going. There's a lot of stuff we can go. Yes, ma'am.
Just metal process
Right.
Are you trained in metalwork, or do you have
Not at all.
people to help you with that?
Improve people.
And how many people, for example, does it take to build a hot dog when they're out front?
Red, before you answer that question, could everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
Never mind.
I did that, I think I did it, I think at Beacon, the foundry there. Talents, yeah, that was done at Talents. And I've worked with there on several occasions. And they have a crew, of course, of welders. They were probably two or three that worked on it. I had made a maquette for it out of paper because I can work in paper, foam core, cardboard, things like that.
One of the things that I think is really cool is, the longer you stay in this game, you see generations get involved, is that Red's longtime assistant, who's now got his own career going, was Tom Burkhardt. And he was the guy who would carve a lot of the things for you to help you complete these things for the carousel and all these other things. But you, in his dad, Rudy, who's one of my favorite New York, that photograph of the flat iron is just
Yeah,
off the scale.
Rudy,
So few people know about that piece. But
Yeah.
how cool is that to be working with an artist and all of a sudden you're working with his son as an
Yeah.
assistant to do that?
and we worked together, I used to say 20 years, I think it's more like 30 years.
Yeah. And he'd be doing his own stuff at the same time, but he'd come in.
Yeah, Tom Burkhardt, very good artist on his own.
So just a follow-up question. You work small in various mediums to realize an idea, like Jumbo or the hot dog.
Right.
It goes out to a foundry, the master crafts it, and then craft it. Who's doing the final painting of the enamel paint on all of these?
Well, I do that with people like Tom. We have a small crew, 2 or 3, that we do the painting part.
He'll do all the fine tuning on
But I have to use the experts on the welding and on metalwork in general. I did the big piece of Ruckus Manhattan. We had our own in-house welders, and at least 3 of them were women. The welders, see, there you go.
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah, right. We did the Brooklyn Bridge, and that was all steel.
Now, wasn't Ruckus a nickname for one of your characters?
Yeah, it was.
Before it became Ruckus Manhattan?
Actually, Ruckus was a carriage course in Florence, Italy. And I was Mimi Gross, friend of mine, very close friend, and Catherine Kane. Mimi and Catherine were great friends, and they had Mimi had made a shadow puppet show that she would perform in her studio in the winter, and they had the idea to take it on the road, so they bought a gypsy carriage and got this horse that had been a carriage horse, and we called it Horse Ruckus. And that horse really was the namesake for what I became Ruckus Manhattan.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Other questions?
I was wondering, for a piece like right behind you, do you actually go and take photographs, which you then effectively work off of?
I do, I'm not a photographer. I used to throw away cardboard cameras, and I do take a lot of pictures, but I also draw. I draw on the spot. Drawing on the spot is sometimes very discouraging, especially if you're doing something real big. But when you get it back in the studio, it is the medium that you're going to be working. It's a hand done part of art technology. So you just hang on it, even the roughest sketch, you hang on to the in the studio, it helps.
One of the things that's so cool about the drawing process is that part of the event is such that you're recording stuff in your brain, you're remembering stuff that is much more detailed and much more, the information is much more vast than what you have on a sketch, a scribble. But when you look at that scribble, it kicks it back into gear.
That's very true.
But you don't get that from photography. That's what you can't believe how many people go, man, you do these things, you don't use photographs to do them. And if you take a photograph from Piazza di Michelangelo in Florence, looking west, it looks like, you got a column and then you got the sun. And you get a little river there. When in fact, if you're there, there's layer after layer after layer of river, fold after rhythm of these landforms that just take you right off to the horizon. There's got to be 7 or 8 of them. And it's just a stunning rhythm that complements the way the river goes. You can never get that with photography because the nature of the one eye of the lens is to flatten out what you got so that they can get it all into 2 dimensions. So there's really a lot to be said for doing the drawing.
That's so right, and you have to reinterpret the photograph, whereas the drawing you make on the spot it doesn't need interpretation.
No, it's there. Okay. But you're drawing literally at a huge scale. I mean, one of the things that's really rare about you is that you're able to keep the spontaneous event of drawing, which is that immediate translation from your head into your finished things. Representational work so often gets suffocated between that initial idea and the finished piece, whether the piece is little or big, And you just surprised me when you said it's really discouraging going out there to draw these things in public, because it sure doesn't look like it. I mean, it doesn't look.
Yeah, but I mean, you think, well, here's the thing. I went to the stock exchange, and that's when they would let you go be on the balcony, you can see. Now when you see this fantastic active number of people, doing something very interesting, but that is modular, basically. You can see you've got a certain number of stands, more or less, you can quickly see it scattered. Then you see basically the room with the board and so forth. That's actually easy because then, and that's what I did on the bus, then you make up the people separate and stick them in where you want. Same as on the bus, I just made up the people. I mean, it's better just to take it out of your head.
I know that lady with her hair up. She lived down the street.
If you just start doodling, cartooning, you come up with characters.
Oh, yeah, that would be a
But the way you get stuck, what really messes you up is when you're between trying to figure out reality and using photography and trying to get on the level that your head opens up and lets that, just like you say, the instinct, the visual instinct is back there. We carry a ton of information, but how to let it come out.
Yeah, we used to
The operational information.
very tough. Because one of the guys who I think does a really good job, I don't know how he does it, is Eric Fischel, who takes photographs and then he'll manipulate them on the thing. Then he gets them and he goes, oh, well, this is kind of how I want to do it. But he doesn't grid it out or project on the camera. He just takes it and then draws a freeform right from that thing.
Yeah,
and then he forgets about it. Then he lets the rest.
And he gets a psychological situation that you couldn't hardly catch in a photograph.
Exactly.
You couldn't really, or very rarely.
White and stark before. He just doesn't want to have people around.
Yeah.
This is why he does that. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. 2 parts. You get an idea and you work and you get it in front of you. I was curious how long that process takes. And you do multiple projects at the same time?
I do maybe not more than 3, but 2. But just practicality.
But you're thinking about, you've got such.
I've got like 2 ideas,
Yeah, I mean, you've got.
maybe 3. And then
Now I've seen you chew up and walk across the studio at the same time.
Well, actually, what's good is, it's bad if you go on a vacation, say, the ideas build up. So you get a bunch of ideas, but you really don't know what to do with them until hopefully one of them comes to the fore. Then you just take that one and great, just concentrate on that one and the other stuff forget about it. And that's very good to get to that stage, because the stage where you're flying around and uncertain what you're going to do is your nerves are unsettled. Your patience is bad. You want to get going immediately. You know, you take the bat knife and stab yourself in the head because you're so nervous and anxious to get going. You know, there's blood all over the place and you're still not getting anywhere. This is what
this is the bar.
Yeah.
Probably thing.
But once you, have an idea that seems worthy, and it also is worth spending the time to do it. And that's good. That's a good place to be. And then if you can get away, you can, I've found myself, I love to doodle while I'm talking on the phone, and it's gotten me in trouble quite a lot. Because people ask me to do something, I'm not doodling, my mind's real open, I can do anything, it's go anything I want to. I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is easy, when they tell me. Because my mind's open, and it's working. And then immediately, you can't do that all the time. It's like the 2-minute drill in football, where they can make the touchdown in about 4 plays. Why do they do it all the time? It's the same thing. Life isn't really easy, but sometimes there are moments of easiness in it, occasionally.
Yeah, I did 30 pieces at once, and they're all different stages. So I remember, it didn't seem like that many, but when we moved most of our stuff out of Manhattan to Western Mass, I couldn't find a time to just, okay, now we'll move, because it was all like interwoven in with each other, and that got to be just insane. But they're different sizes, different, media, and I polished my paintings, which is great for wrecking things, and that, things are stuck in, a friend of mine, Jim will know Bob Marion, who was our hockey coach at Deerfield, and his wife Mary collects dollhouses, and there's a tradition in England where the Queen would ask the artists of the day to contribute miniature paintings that would go into these dollhouses, and she goes, "Would you feel like doing something?" I said, "Sure, that sounds like fun." She goes, "You would? I'm going to hold you to it." I said, "Yeah, sure." So, and you look at my friend who was my hockey coach, and big mistake. I don't know what you got into. Anyway, she goes, "Okay, I need this." She sent me little frames for them and stuff. And so I did these little paintings, and I got them down there and took the power tool, and they gone. Just, there wasn't a molecule left. So, and I lined a bunch of them, figured I'd wreck some of them, I didn't wreck all of them. So we eventually pulled it off, but there is safety in numbers, And there's a second part to your
You get from inspiration to finished product. How long does it take to develop something like that?
You know what? It's hard to tell. I mean, it's kind of just like real life, 2 weeks is goes. If you go somewhere and you don't want to be there, 2 weeks sounds like forever. But just in a normal course of time, you don't do nearly as much as you plan to, right? So, it takes 4 or 5 months.
But some projects
4 or 5
happen
months.
in
6 to 8 months.
They're so fluid. And then you try to reproduce them, you can't. It's a very fragile thing, and I think that's one of the main fulcrums of art, is that it is so accidental. It is, even the most precise photorealist painters have accidents all the time, and it's those accidents that really render the mystery that the best art, I think, delivers to its audience. So that's right.
It would be very dangerous to commit to the finishing of a piece like this if it was a sort of unreasonable schedule, like 5 weeks. finish it in 5 weeks, because it probably took 10 weeks. So it's not unusual or extraordinary or anything like that. It's just kind of a natural course of life and work.
I think that's why those guys are coming over to London next week. My show's not until February, but they're coming over next week to see the work, and it's not there.
Yeah, you can get in bad situations.
Yeah, they want to make sure that we.
It's very. My thing is, you never feel ready to show something. Somehow, my whole career, I've never really felt I was ready.
That's the thing about Albert, the English painter.
Right.
Is he'll work on it. He'll show it, he'll work on it. And you've got these layers on it. Taking years and years for a piece that's this big. Then finally he'll say it's done.
Yeah.
Wasn't it Monet who has to be banned from the Louvre because he kept coming in with brushes?
That, I can imagine a lot of those guys doing that.
40 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. I can believe
I think Bonnard did it. He would come in and go, his thing.
Turner would do that, but he would finish it except for the ultra dark shadows and the super bright highlights. So he'd go in there with like a sort of the equivalent, visual equivalent of BMAC, no low ends or no highs, and he'd go in there in like 5 minutes. He'd put the highlights there and the dark shadows would walk out, and the other artists would go. I mean, he did it as a performance to humiliate the other guys, and that was pretty funny.
So many of what you described are things right here, joyful, playful. But that painting over there is filled with darkness. Is there a reason for that, or are you trying to get something other than?
Well, I honestly, I guess that Bruegel and Bach, people do say, in the kind of work they do with it's probably figure painting and it's some grotesquerie and so forth. I do catch the darkness in their work, and I've always been aware of it. And I like it, and I like to get into that world myself. And even, the kinds of these kinds of entertainment services, the carnivals, are, and everyone knows, rather dark, really, in many ways. There's a sort of almost clichéness about, the idea that they're fun and light and balloony and all that kind of stuff, where in fact it's like could be played as a deep, deep tragedy, actually. So I suppose I was enjoying that in that picture. I've always have a deep feeling for Coney Island and what it stood for. It's just means a lot to me. It's one of the basis of why I like these cities, really. It's a kind of stand-in for a place like Coney Island, Manhattan. Could be like a carnival. In other words, what I did, I guess, in taking a look at Manhattan, I did see the whole city as a kind of gruesome entertainment. And people liked it, actually. People liked it. You don't really know why, but they responded to it. They saw something in it that surprised them and delighted them, really. That's an interesting area, and it's like what Stephen does is he writes a whole text inside his visual imagery, which is sometimes undoubtedly goes quite dark and personal.
It's whatever is going on. It's as spontaneous as the brushstrokes.
Right.
You have an idea, it's coming, other times they just sort of happen.
Right. And even though we're visual artists, we'll probably be both like to tell stories.
Yeah.
And
which is kind of curious in this age, because we're in a sound-like age where, politicians are given 9 words to say, whatever they're going to say. So as a result, we have these polarized entities. There's no way you can get cohesive ideas expressed in that. And I think the frustration we have in the cultural arena now is what has gotten many of us to take these traditional media into the areas we are, whether three-dimensional, animated, or whether I write on these things. I was at the Met with one of the curators one day, just hanging out there watching the guys come through the gallery, and one guy sort of walking in, and there are these attractive women who were maybe in their early 40s. They had to be twin sisters, at least sisters, and this guy was married to one of them, and they were really into all the art. They come into the room, and this guy's following them, and he's like, so this is art. He wasn't going to be impressed with anything. Anyway, he comes up to this thing, and he sees the painting, he walks away, and then he sees the painting, and he goes back and he, hey, Margaret, son of a bitch. He's got rhino. Wait a minute. I didn't think you're allowed to do that. And, you know, from the mouth of babes, you know, we're sitting there. Thankfully, the curator took that in as well. I think they left the painting somewhere in a couple of years. But it's true, you know. I mean, there are sort of rules that the culture thinks that you sort of have to stay within. And I think just the nature of what we do is trying to bust out of this.
Yeah.
And you can lead the way, let me tell you. Oh my God. You know, I don't know if any of you were in Manhattan when Ruckus Manhattan was at Grand Central Station.
Yeah.
When was that?
93.
I didn't, you know, we were friends then.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I knew something was going on, but I saw it on the Today Show. And you were there going, yeah, you were hanging out there next to these guys, and you looked like one of the characters that were hanging out there. And you had your red jacket on, and Brian Gumbel was just spellbound. And
That was very early in the morning.
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
Oh, yeah, no, you gotta get
That
up
was
earlier
in
than that. But that installation with Philippe Petit crossing the World Trade Center, that was so effective in that space. I mean,
Well, what happened though, that was when the first attack occurred. We had just set up in the space, and I had my 30-foot high World Trade Center piece there. And the first attack happened. And the exhibition had not actually opened to the public. And it was a strange effect because when something like that happens, it's such a hot issue that the press would absolutely not look at the towers.
yeah.
Absolutely didn't know how to handle it. And they just wouldn't look at it. It was understandable.
Yeah.
It was such seriousness.
Well, you know, that's interesting because they asked Marty Scorsese about that when he did Gangs of New York. Because when it ends, there's a artist rendering that's a matte painting that's off in the distance when the characters are moving on. And he was asked if he felt any pressure to remove those now that they weren't there. And he said it's part of the history that you have to embrace as an artist and as a person living in the culture. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one or two more.
Okay. Anybody else?
Oh, here.
The what you just mentioned, the installation at Grand Central, is that in storage? Or is it?
Oh, yes, well, some of it is. The subway actually was bought, and now it's in Berlin. And it has been in Berlin quite a long time now. Almost 20 years ago. And the Woolworth building is in Nagoya, Japan. What else is there? A lot of the rest is in storage. The alley is in storage. The big library is in storage. The great big taxi is in storage.
That's why I said I like that particular installation the best, because they're all different configurations depending on what space you can only handle certain things. And that room at Grand Central Station is just perfect. Gave the space.
Yeah.
You don't see it's confined. Even in Marlboro, where it's a big space, but it's still confined.
I have a question for both of you. When you get back to the studio and you have some time and you're not being required to sit here and talk or do other things like that, what are the 2 or 3 things that you're working on?
Well, after I return your fundraising emails,
That's what we pay
he's doing a great job. It's one of the most enlightened museum directors on it, but I'm not saying that just because he's here. But we do
I've been working, I had a show a year ago in Marlboro, their smaller gallery called Torn from the Pages, and they were portraits of other artists. And one of the shows the Nevelson and the Joan Mitchell that are in the show in the back there. I take the illustrations of other artists and I use them in some way, and then I do the portrait of the artist. And then the other thing, what else am I doing? Oh, on top, I have something that's sort of very Faustian or something about it. I want to, I've made films, but I haven't made films in a long time, and I want to use some of the new technologies, even though I don't know how. But I went and listed some of the younger people, and I have this ambition to make an animated film on the First World War. Because I had worked about 15 years on the Civil War. We have a place in Tennessee, southeastern Tennessee, in the Cumberland Mountains. And about 15 years ago, I started on the Civil War. And I didn't even think of the relationship of starting the First World War after that. Except that when I was a kid in Nashville, they had a very good, very funky First World War museum underneath the War Memorial Building there. It was sort of the lower basement. I just loved the place. And now it's kind of like home for me because my carousel is now stored underneath the First World War basement, so it's kind of layers of history.
I've got a piece that is going to be installed in a new science building at MCLA, which is the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, and it's a world record pace, but it's being given to the school. Their president is really cool, amazingly very bad. And this is going to be, they're doing a ribbon cutting on Friday, and in Duval Packard's coming in to do the whole song and dance, which is really curious. It's one of the stories I have hidden throughout this, and it's the same composition of the piece that's up in the National Gallery in Washington now, which is actually of the Hoosick River Valley, looking west over the mountains. And one of the jazz musicians I worked for was this guy, Sun Ra. I don't know if you know Sun Ra, but he's in band, plays with the pyramid hats and stuff. And we produced, I did a portrait of him, and the album was paid for by a guy named John Sprague, whose family owned the electrical plant that is now in Asmoka. But the wild thing about it is the sax player was Duval's father, who bolted out of his family when Duval was a little kid and went to follow this crazy jazz musician. So we had, and that whole story's coming around. And Duval knows that this is we get a couple of us get drafted for these political things every once in a while, and I told him I actually done some work with his father and wanted that to really stop traffic. So that's one of the stories that's going to be woven into this thing. Finished or not, the ribbon gets cut on next Friday.
David Singh has one last, very just short, very little question.
Steve, did you become an artist because you were cut from the hockey team?
I have any feeling to the side of my face. I split a couple of face masks with some shots, but You know, that's a good question. I always thought I was going to go back to Bowdoin and play, and that's when Leonard Baskin asked me to work with him privately. And that's like the best art school in the world, you know. And the coach of the school, he said, just come on back, you play whenever you get around, because you were only allowed to stay at Smith for 1 semester on the 12 college exchange. And I was there for 6, so it's, let me tell you, I have some stories about that. Whoa. Another time.
I just want to say, on